Now, David, what's important about this, in my view, and I know in your view, is when the cook first attempted his landing, he was met by Aborigines on the shore who made it very clear in their own language that they did not want them to land. And what they said was noted in the diaries as Warra Warra Way. Warra Warra Way, which means go away now.
We know that on the 29th of April 1770, a big object came through the heads of Botany Bay. You know, Kamay, Gamay, however we want to say that. And my people didn't know what it was, but they knew it was coming because all along the coast, even in Cook's journals, they record the sightings of fires, campfires. They were signals. Our people talking with fire to let the next mob further north know that this big bird or big object was coming, and they didn't know what it meant, but they knew it was coming, that's for sure. That story is still with us today, and there's still a story that we need to talk about what that changed for Aboriginal people. If someone came to your house without knocking on the door, you probably wouldn't let them in. And it's no different to what these two warriors were doing. They were standing their ground, protecting their people, protecting their land, protecting their home. Now, within 15 minutes of arrival, Cook states in his journal that he fired the musket. He fired a couple of shots and hit one of the warriors in the leg, which was a young man. Whether we want to own it or say the truth about what it is, it's a forced entry. My people are very happy people. They're very humble. And so they would have invited Cook in if he just waited for that acceptance. And that never happened, and we're still living with that. And I mean, we tend to treat the symptoms of the problem for Aboriginal people. We throw money into health. We throw money into treating alcohol and drugs. But what has gone missing between that is the culture. My people need to be connected to their land. They need an identity. They need their culture, which is their foundation for moving forward. It's their strength. Without that, Aboriginal people are lost. My name's Dean Kelly, but Dean Kelly is an English name. As a cultural man, I'm a Yuin Walbunja Duriga Garanji Wawan Nampa man. Saltwater, freshwater, stone country man. The site we're standing on today is important to all Australians across the nation, and it has many stories. This place is a story of humanity, you know, and we still haven't had that discussion. The discussion is more about emotion and an emotional journey that this country has to have to look at what's happened, where we are, and how we move that into the future so our children own that and accept that we are Australians, we are human beings, and we need to live here together as people. Behind me you'll see a big, large monument. I respect that as an Aboriginal man. It represents the acknowledgement of Cook. You know, that's important to a lot of people. To my people, my monuments are in the landscape and in the waters, in the sky, and even things like the sun that is shining on me now. It's all part of my culture and my beliefs.
The first land grant on the Kurnell headland was made in 1815, when 700 acres were acquired by James Burney. In 1860, Burney's Alpha Farm, still mostly virgin land covered with scrub timber and native grasses, was sold to the very wealthy Thomas Holt, a member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. Holt had made a fortune in land speculation following the gold rushes of the 1850s. In 1868, Holt began an intensive project to clear his land and plant it with foreign grasses. Then he brought in sheep, but dingoes killed thousands of them. No sooner were they brought under control than the sheep were infected with foot rot and had to be destroyed. Holt tried cattle next. They fared little better, but completed the damage the sheep had begun. By 1870, the green hills on Kurnell Peninsula showed big areas of exposed dune where the grass had been eaten out. To recoup his losses, Holt tried his hand in the timber industry. Turpentine, ironbark, blackbutt and mahogany were felled and floated out to his ships. Eventually he sold the rights to all standing timber on his property. Yet in 1873, Holt had the gall to urge the New South Wales government to take immediate steps to preserve the state's timber. By 1883, Sydney's air was not only polluted by disgustingly offensive industrial odours, but threatened with bubonic plague. A royal commission suggested Kurnell Peninsula as the site for Sydney's tanneries, glue works, soap works, wool scouring mills, lime burning kilns and sewage farms. 3,500 acres of land at Kurnell were subsequently resumed and dedicated to the various noxious trades, waste industries and a cemetery.
So I just wanted to start with just an acknowledgement of country. You're on the land of the Dharawal people, and I get really emotional about it. Sorry, they are the past, present, and future custodians of this land that we're on, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. This meeting place had a lot of consultation with Aboriginal people to bring them back and make them feel comfortable in this place again, in view of what had happened in the past. So, and that was a really positive outcome for this site. So reinterpreting and encompassing all aspects of the site. So bringing in that Aboriginal perspective, but maintaining the feelings around Cook that, you know, perhaps Europeans feel. Probably 2008, the site was upgraded and reinterpreted. Previous to that, had very little Aboriginal content in it. So the Borrowing Walk was a way of introducing a new way of looking at this place as the meeting place of cultures that happened a little over 200 years ago, or approaching 250 years ago. That meant bringing the Aboriginal community in, getting them to tell their stories, their version of events. So that meant taking out some of the old interpretation and replacing it with new. And after that, the trust that looked after this site had planted a lot of introduced trees as well, so it was in a pretty degraded state. So the idea was that by revegetating it back to the community that was once there, visitors to the site would be able to walk through and imagine what it would have been like in you know, when Cook first arrived. Aboriginal people and Europeans, when they came, found that there was plenty to eat and drink here, so which was why they stayed for 8 days when Captain Cook originally came. And it's a living place. It's where we all live here, and you know, Aboriginal people lived here and still live here.
Tell me what it is.
This is a volcanic dike which is cut through the sandstone. It's younger than sandstone and it would have erupted up above us somewhere as a volcano and a sheet flow of lava. We don't know the ages of them. They're probably about 150, 200 million years old. There's quite a lot in Sydney, but you don't normally see them unless they get exposed by erosion. This is a great test. If you can't answer this correctly by this far down the walk, you better give up. You must have passed hundreds.
This is a piece of stone.
We're only missing David. In fact, it's a broken quartz pebble, yeah. It's an Aboriginal flake.
Aboriginal?
Yeah. Hard artefact.
So hard stone.
They're picking the local quartz pebbles that occur in the sandstone. Here, see a few larger ones down there in the gully line. And just big enough to break, and they'll give you a little sharp edge. This is a waste flake. Nothing's been done with it. There used to be tens of thousands of artefacts along this peninsula, but the place has been picked clean by collectors over the years. There's probably 10,000 artefacts in the Australian Museum from Kurnell.
A lot of people walk past life because they've got other things on their mind. When you walk on country, it's important that the mind is clear, the mind is open, and that the spirit is calm. And the only way you can do that is prepare yourself before you go in there. So the journey is not about going in there and getting through it. It's about what it can give you while you're there. And feeling everything that is there, because usually when you walk on country, the only one who doesn't know you're there is you. All the other living things, such as plants and animals, can sense that you're there because they're connected to that place.
It is in a swale. You can see that the slope comes down on either side. So all the sand that's up there and the shallow rock over here is trapping the rain that's coming in, and it's slowly flowing out here, and that's actually at groundwater level. Now the reason why we stopped you on this one, because we're going to show you another one towards the end of the section where it's been totally degraded and the landscape is actually inverted, and where the swamp used to be is the highest point of the landscape.
Really?
Mm.
But a swale may or may not have water in it.
They won't always have water in it, they're often dry. But this one is low enough to have tapped the groundwater, and it's probably got bedrock very close underneath it, which is sealing it. And it also have organic material in the bottom of it, sealing it up. The whole of this peninsula used to be a natural peninsula covered in vegetation, tall forests in fact. And at this end of it, where the sand over the bedrock is quite shallow, it was all a heath community, as you see it here now. And this has not changed much. This is still pretty much as it was when Cook would have turned up. But where you get the deeper sands further on, it was tall forests. In the 1860s, Thomas Holt finally got hold of it. By that stage, all the trees had been cut out for firewood, and he put sheep and cattle on it, and he was grazing it very heavily. The sheep didn't do very well because the growth of the grass was awful. It was mainly just blady grass. It got picked out and burnt out very quickly. Then the sand started to blow, and by the 1950s, it was just all bare sand from more or less from here on. But this end didn't blow, not to the same extent anyway, because the heath vegetation wasn't attractive to sheep, is my conclusion. So you look at that and you've got almost pristine heath. It has folded back from the edge here a bit. You can see the edge of the rocks, the colour changes from a bit brownish to almost stark white. That would have had vegetation and soil on it in Cook's time. That's blown out and blown back up into the dunes, but the very edge of the cliff has always been bare. There's too much salt spray gets up in there for anything to grow, and the winds are too strong, it just keeps it blown out. And as we go around this point, we'll pick up on the devastation.
We cannot change what's happened, we cannot wind the clock back, but we can do the right thing by each other. We can find a deep humanity that lives within all of us to do the right thing, to live a true and honest life. Or otherwise, in another 200 years, 250 years, we'll be still in the same position. They'll still be treating the symptoms of the problem and not dealing with the root of the problem.
And the interesting thing is, this would not have been available to Aborigines because it was deep in the soil. Yeah. Our little hanging swamp that we saw a little while ago with a nice pool of water and everything in it, that's a hanging swamp up there which has been totally drained because all of the sand around it has been eroded out since 1840s. And the sheep and cattle came in here, vegetation destabilised, bit of burning, it all starts to blow, it's blowing in off the coast where the wind is the strongest. It's left the swamp absolutely isolated up there on the pinnacle with a bit of more younger blown sand on top of it. And we've got a carbon-14 date out of the base of that peat at just on 5,000 years. So it gives you an indication of how long this landscape has been stable and how quickly it came apart. On the foreground in front of us, all this convoluted iron material is the iron pan that occurs at the very base of the soil profile. In this case, about 3 or 4 metres below the peat. It's down at the water table level, just above the bedrock. It would not have been exposed to Aboriginal people. They probably never saw anything like it because you have to erode it to see it. Iron just leaches down out of the sand above it and precipitates where it changes oxidation conditions in the water table. The sand you see above it is yellowish, which means the individual grains have got iron coatings on them. The vegetation is capable of stripping that stuff off as the water moves down through the veg, and it moves down the sand profile. It'll either go out to sea in solution, or if it meets an oxidation boundary, it'll precipitate again, and that's what's happened here. From here on, all of the dunes and so forth you're going to walk through Boat Harbour and right around to Cronulla in the 50s was totally bare, totally bare. And you look at the 65 air photos, you see all the patterns of the old beach ridges. You walk across it was hummocking, you find all the old tree stumps that they cut down in the 1820s, just turning away and rotting into bits of mashed up wood and stuff, but now nearly all gone. It's covered in bitter bush and coast wattle, which Soilcon and the Water Board put in there in the 60s to try to stop the sand drift. Because they had 2 major sewer outfalls running along the coast, and they kept blowing out, and they blow out underneath the pipe, and the pipe would fall down and the sewage would go everywhere. So they did the Soilcon, first of the sort of Soilcon rehab works, but used the wrong species, which are now weedy as hell. Yeah. We saw the iron pan round there underneath the hanging swamp, and I said that the iron was coming out of the sand, being leached out by organic material coming down in the water. Here it is actually being precipitated. And you can see this stain that looks like an oil stain, this iridescence, that's bacterially deposited iron oxides. But many prospectors have thought they've got an oil seep on when they've popped onto this one.
That's not the petroleum.
No, it's got nothing to do with pollution. You'll find it in all sorts of places where you've got very acid soils. The other reason I stopped here is the boulders. We're on the rock platform, we've got a boulder beach, and the highest level of storm wave activity today is up around the edge of the vegetation, but the boulders go up another 2 or even 3 metres into the dune. So we've got a boulder beach which is higher than any modern storm activity. Those boulders were put there by the sea. 2 possibilities: a higher sea level or an extreme event like a tsunami. It's really difficult to sort out which is which, but on the other side of the peninsula, in one of the old sand pits, at 2.5 to 3 metres above sea level, we found a shell bed with all the shells in situ, bivalves which were still closed in position of growth, a date of 3,500 years. Looks like, and we're getting more and more of that evidence up and down the coast, looks like we had sea level about 2 to 3 metres higher than present 3,500 years ago. So what are we worried about global warming for? There's the evidence before you that it's been up there before. It'll go back up there again, whether it's greenhouse climate change or not. There is some evidence for tsunami along the New South Wales coast. Ted Bryant at Wollongong has done quite a lot of work on it, and he said there have been 3 in the last 3,000 years, I think is the number. I've looked at some of his sites. They don't totally convince me, but a site like this is where you might have it. And the way to do it would be to dig into those boulders and find out what's underneath them. Is there a shelled trash bed or something down under there that might be related to a big wave event? It's possible. It's certainly possible.
There'll be something to ride your board on, wouldn't it?
We talk about a place like Captain Cook's Landing's place, whatever label you want to put on it, Kamay, Gamay, Botany Bay, it's still alive. It still has a story every time you go in there. No matter how many times you walk on this land, you'll get another part of that story. If you allow yourself, the story will never end. And today, Kamay Botany Bay National Park is a shared place. And I accept that.
When James Cook walked across Kurnell in 1770 to look down on what is today called Cronulla, he made no mention of any bare dunes. We found, in many places, a deep black soil which we thought was capable of producing any kind of grain. At present it produces, besides timber, as fine a meadow as ever was seen. Yet just 100 years later, the destruction wrought by Europeans at Kurnell matched that which had taken 6,000 years to achieve in the Middle East. The forests had been cut down and ring-barked, the scrub cleared, the ground cover overgrazed, the soil blew away, and the beautiful perched lakes were collapsed. The stable, vegetated dunes of Kurnell now became a transgressive dune sheet, and a beautiful place that had supported the first Australians for tens of thousands of years became a desert virtually overnight. Fast forward another 70 years to 1940 and film producer Charles Chevelle's 40,000 Horsemen, where the Kurnell dune field became the Sinai Desert and the scene of the attack on Beersheba by the Australian Light Horse, said to be the last successful cavalry charge in history. Clearly a propaganda film, it served to aid recruitment and lift morale at home, becoming one of the most successful Australian movies of its day. From the 1950s, Kurnell sand became essential to the Sydney building industry, with many millions of tonnes carted away. Today, that towering dunescape and testament to poor land practice has been reduced to a few remnant dunes and deep water-filled pits, many of which have been filled with demolition waste from Sydney's building sites. Sand removal has also weakened the peninsula's capacity to resist storms. Ocean waves pounding the reduced Kurnell dune system have threatened to break through to Botany Bay, especially during the storms of May-June 1974 and August 1998. The sand miners, finding their resources dwindling, are now looking to further profit from the stripped land by building residential housing and new industrial complexes on the Kurnell Peninsula. If we continue to do this to our country, to strip it and to mine it, and to not care for it, it will be reduced to what is in effect a large-scale, depleted and unrepairable mine site. A tip, basically, which is what you've been looking at here. In many ways, Kurnell is a metaphor for modern European Australia. Could it also be a portent? Next morning, the walkers motor across Port Hacking on the 75-year-old Curra Moors, said to be the oldest Australian ferry still operating to a timetable.
Go the protest!
Yeah, welcome to Bundeena. How are you? Welcome to the Royal National Park.
The Bundeena region is characterised by aeolian sand dunes overlying sandstone, as was the case at Kurnell before it was ravaged by unthinking and uncaring development. But here, just beyond the Bundeena township perimeter, the dunes remain fully vegetated and virtually undisturbed, more or less as they were at the time of European arrival. Spring Gully includes 5.6 hectares of privately owned land that was originally gifted to the Boy Scouts Association in the 1960s, but it was recently sold by the Scouts to a private developer. It contains an unbroken canopy of Angofra forest, Sydney sandstone gully forest, freshwater wetland, an ancient stand of bloodwood mallee, and it's an important habitat for many protected species and migratory birds. Only old trees like these can develop the hollows that are essential to the survival of native fauna. Spring Gully also contains many sites of significant Aboriginal heritage. The developer wants to build tourist accommodation and hold functions and event conferences. Fire regulations also demand the clearing of an additional 2.5 hectares of pristine forest if it's to go ahead, and this would necessitate the destruction of more than 1,000 trees. All other bushland in Spring Gully is either already in the Royal National Park or currently being transferred to national parks, and we think that this land should be added to it.
Can everyone just jump around? I'm just going to give you our welcome. This is the way we welcome everyone to our tours. I'm Ian from Sydney Coast Walks. It's a pleasure to be involved in the inaugural Sydney Harbour and Coast Walk. And welcome to Royal National Park, the oldest national park in Australia. It's just a Dharawal country. We always start all of our tours and all our walks by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. We do it in language. So in the Dharawal language, Babana Judamin Gamarada Nania, Dharawal Yorda and Guriji, which means brothers, sisters, friends, I see you all, Dharawal people camped here. And we're just acknowledging that the spirits of the Dharawal people remain tied to this land, and they remain tied to this land for eternity. And we just ask that you respect the land you walk across today. Now you can just see you've got little jellyfish there as well, and you can see on the other side of that you start to see the pectoral fins of the big whales. But in the hunt, the male leads out the hunt. So once again, these are orca. They can see the size of him. So his head's down on our right, facing west. His tail's down there. Got a massive big 2-metre dorsal fin up the top there. Yeah, he's Gurrawal, the great whale. So orca, Gurrawal, the great whale, herd baby humpbacks usually up onto the beach. Dharawal men would come down and kill the humpback, and then they'd feast. So they'd all come together for feast and ceremony. They'd then make an offering of the law of the tongue, which is the lower jaw, the lips and the tongue, make an offering of that to the orca. And this process was repeated for centuries, millennia, generations. And so the orca, Gurrawal, the great whale, by bringing that much food to allow all the Dharawal people to come and feast, is the bringer of the law. Because then they could come together and sing the laureate ceremony. So the orca is a totemic emblem of all the Dharawal people.
All things have a circle, all living things have a circle, but in Western society we seem to box things up. This goes there, that goes there. Once we look at things in a circle, such as a fire, it's everlasting life. They all overlap. So them circles become one big circle. Now shortly the whales will do their journey and they'll do a circle. But still today people don't understand that them whales aren't just swimming for the sake of swimming. A part of it is, yes, their survival and they'll give birth in the warm waters, but they'll do a big circle in that. But out along that coast, they're following the old songlines of the old people. Because the coast 7,000 years ago was 15 more kilometres further to the east. Now experts will tell you that, but my old people know everything that's out there. And we still have that. We still have the ability to connect with that. We don't go there under the water, but we still know them stories. And as long as we talk about it, we sing about it, we practice it, we keep them alive. We keep our culture alive, the oldest living culture in the world.
So you're obviously all familiar with Depression era dwellings all along the coastline, you know, caves, little humpies, driftwood things, whatever. So this was probably Depression era, but we don't know for sure. But what we do know, post-World War II, Canadian ex-serviceman and his wife came and lived in here for 7 years.
Fantastic.
So it served on the Western Front, pretty, probably what we'd call now is post-traumatic stress disorder, but didn't want anything to do with society, but convinced his wife, who was also Canadian, to come and live out in this cave for 7 years. So it used to have a wall across it, there was a door, there's stairs down here, it actually led up to a doorway, there was a window. Obviously that's all gone now because it's open to the elements, like you're facing east, you know. Big swell, king tide, you're going to be wet. Look at the fireplace at the front, look how sturdy that is. People remember him, or did remember him, carrying 100-pound bags of cement out from Bundeena. 40 kilos on each shoulder, walking out through the bush to build that for him and his wife. But, look at your view. It's not bad, eh? So what you're looking at, all these boulders that we're standing amongst are all tsunami debris. So there's evidence to say a tsunami hits the southeast coast of Australia every 250 years. This is about 250 years old. We'll go past one in another hour or so that's 500 years old. Now there hasn't been one since European arrival. Sort of about 236 years. So we're effectively due for a tsunami to hit the southeast coast of Australia anytime soon. And with the amount of volcanic activity down in New Zealand, it's not hard to imagine. The one that pretty much crippled and decimated Christchurch, unfortunately, if that was on the northwest coast of New Zealand, that would have been very interesting for southeastern Australia. But yeah, this is all tsunami debris. Came from a rock ledge just out there. So the wave came from the southeast, picked up all these boulders from the ledge, and threw them up here. It's a pretty cosy little cabin, so that's it. What about the view, gents and ladies?
Yes, I have. Yes.
So what we know about this place is during the Depression, so Great Depression, obviously loads of men came and lived out in cliffs and, as I said earlier, built like little driftwood shanties or whatever they could. As far as I know, this was a guy called Fall Down Billy. Came down here in the Depression, called Fall Down Billy because he used to go into Bundeena, get drunk, fall down. And he lived out here for about 20 years, I reckon. So late 1920s through the war. So when Coast Watch came out here during the war, he was still out here, living in this cave. And a couple of the ladies we know in Bundeena said that their great aunties and their great auntie spinsters used to joke about who went back to Fall Down Billy's cave. So he'd come in on a Friday night, not every Friday of course, but come in on a Friday night, go to the RSL club for the dance or a drink, and proposition these ladies to come back to his cave. Yeah, but no one ever admitted. And she said, as a little girl, she used to sit there, and the aunties and the mother and the grandmothers, and they go, yeah, but you went back to Billy's cave that night. And no one ever admitted to going back to his cave.
You know when you gave your love away, it opens your heart, everything is new, and you know time will always find a way to let your heart believe it's true. You know love is everything you say, a whisper, a word, promises you give. You feel it in the heartbeat of the day. You know this is the way love is. Amarantine, amarantine, amarantine. Love is love. Amarantine, amarantine, amarantine. Love is love. You know when love's shining in your eyes, it may be the stars falling from above, and you know love is with you when you rise, for night and day belong to love.
Parents out in the hunt. This is Biami. Biami is the creator. So Biami came down from the sky and created the earth. When he created the earth, he created it with all the dreaming ancestors inside it. And these dreaming ancestors are part spirit and part animal. And so when these dreaming ancestors came out of the earth, they gave light and life to the earth, and it was their journeys across it that shaped it. So you heard of the rainbow serpent, creator serpent? Yep. Yulungul in Durrawal. So she was a dreaming ancestor, big snake, and as she slithered across the land, her huge form created all the valleys and the mountains, and just before she went back into the earth, the frogs came out, and the frogs' bellies were full of water. So when they laughed, the water in their bellies filled the valleys, created the rivers, and it flowed to create the oceans that we know today. So that's Biami, he's the creator.
Our story of the whales is an important one, because the whales in the beginning were once people on the land. They were elders on the land, and they'd had a big meeting about who's going to look after what city in Gadu. Gadu is the sea. And they all decided that half would go to the sea and become whales to look after the foods and medicines and the fish and keep things in order out in Gadu, the ocean. And they're still doing that today. Every year they swim. The east coast and the west coast of Australia, they come from the cold waters and they go to the warm waters and they breed. But as they swim, they sing. They sing a different song every year, but they're singing them old stories and keeping that emotion alive. And that's what's important to me. We still sing to what we call Gurrawal in my language. Gurrawal is the whale. We still sing. Every year we do a ceremony for Gurrawal to help him on his way. Just like you would call a dog or sing to a dog, if you want to put it that way. If you give it a name, that dog will hear you. So will Guru the whale when you sing, and you sing his story.
So you'd come out, you'd light your fire around your campsite, you'd put it out, you'd come out here, you'd sing your sacred Malu dreaming songs, basically invoking the rain, asking for the rain to come, because that's going to bring the rain, the green shoots are going to grow, the kangaroos are going to come to feed on the green shoots, you feed on the kangaroo. That's Malu, bringer of the rain. So Watamola is the Dharawal word for place of running water, but the English word's for Providential Cove. So Bass and Flinders, in one of their early explorations down the south coast, about 1793, had set anchor down off Bald Hill at Sandwell, and big storm picked up, big southerly, so they pulled up the stone, which was their anchor, and they were racing north ahead of this southerly. And it caught him just south of Watamola. And so Bass is on the tiller and Flinders is pulling in the main sheet. This is like an 8 foot by 4 foot Tom Thumb, they called it. And the boy Martin, so little cabin boy, bailing out all the water. So massive swell, massive wind, 100-metre cliff off to the left, just getting buffeted by this southerly. And the story goes that just as they thought they could last no longer and the mast was about to snap and the Tom Thumb was about to capsize, they perceived a break in the cliffs and there was all this white water, and they thought, shit, we're going to give it a go. So they waited for a bit of a lull, turned 180 into the breeze, pulled the sail down and rowed into this cove, which they called Providential Cove, because they'd sought Providence from the southerly. And hence that's how it got its English name. And that was that was one of Bass and Flinders' first journeys. So obviously if they didn't seek Providence in Providential Cove, Matthew Flinders would certainly not have become the first person to circumnavigate Australia. So this is Curra Moors, and Curra Moors means protected from the wind in Dharawal. And just over the ridge line you get Curra Moors, which means exposed to the wind in Dharawal. In our vision it's the top right of this inlet, which is like the southwest corner of the inlet. That inlet goes in for another 50 odd metres, and then you'll hit the creek, Curra Moors Creek. And just up that creek is this beautiful little waterhole that we'll go and check out. You can probably see the cave and the little cabbage tree palms in there. So it's sort of up near there. We're going to check out this beautiful little bush waterhole. But you can see the rest of our path going up into the distance. So we'll go up, there's almost a near vertical pathway going up over the ridge there. We'll go up over that and then down to Curra Moors, which is Eagle Rock. And it's interesting because Curra Moors flows in a creek down to the sea level, but Curra Moors drops like a 50-metre waterfall into the ocean. So two very different inlets separated by only about 500 metres to a K in a straight line. So you're starting to come into views what would be south towards Wollongong, but on this beautiful cloudy misty day the views are a bit obscured. So you've got the beautiful headland. As you come back you've got you came back towards the Curra Moors, which is we love it down there. Great, full of bird life, full of animal life. It's just a stunning little part of Royal National Park. And as you pan sort of back across to the right, the little gully that's sort of down obscured from view is Curra Creek, and that goes into a waterfall. It drops about 50 metres down into the ocean, and that's just under Eagle Rock, and Eagle Rock is the symbol of the park. Pretty much all the water that flows within this basin, within the moors, flows out at either 2 points, and it's Yeah, this one, Curra Creek, drops into a 50-metre waterfall over into the ocean. It's pretty special. But Eagle Rock is the symbol of Royal National Park.
The problem that we have today is money's came into the equation, and bartering, I feel, was a better system of swapping something to something else, rather than this is what it's worth, you give me that. You know, it's a different thought. It's a different appreciation of country and what you can take from it. And there's also the rules around taking from country. It's just like if you borrowed something off another person, you would ask, you would thank. But we don't do that in words. Aboriginal people do that in thought. So when you take something, it may be a leaf off a tree, you know, to use as a medicine or a stick for an artefact. Now, we don't destroy, but we also have that conscience that we're taking something that's living, so we need to ask for that and not destroy it, and then thank once we've done it. The most important thing to Aboriginal people who have their culture is life and looking after life. So when we put value on something, it's about keeping things alive. Okay, whether it's culture or a tree that you take something from, that there's an appreciation that you know that you're not destroying it. You're not ending the life of something. And if there is a sacrifice along the way, that you take the life of a fish or an animal, well, that you don't waste. You know, we're quite wasteful in today's society. My old people never wasted anything. Everything was used. And even to the point where we look at our old middens, our old campsites, that is right along this foreshore as we speak, only a couple of hundred mil under the surface. That's about recycling, giving back to country. Because eventually that material that has come out the ocean, the shell, the bone, the charcoal, will break down and it'll become part of country. So putting back what you've already taken.
These lands were actually a dairy farm many years ago, and the original shack was owned by or built by an Aboriginal who was actually helping run the dairy farm. So that's how it sort of all started. And then in the Depression, people from Helensburgh built in all 3 or 4 valleys, I should say, and they built their little shacks down here so they could stay Monday to Friday, get enough supply of food and take it back to Helensburgh and feed their families. They weren't squatters in those days because they paid a rent to the farm owner. So when it came to trying to get rid of us national parks, they couldn't actually get rid of us because we weren't known as squatters, we were actually paying a rent.
Look at you.
So this is Eyrie. So North Eyrie is just down here, a bit hidden out of view. We'll cross along that rock ledge, around the headland there, down onto the beach at South Eyrie. And then where we're headed is basically up that ridge line, just the other side of the shacks, and follow that ridge line up the hill to Garrawarra Farm, and then we're going to drop down the other side to Lily Vale. Right, so what we've got here is what remains of about a 7,000-year-old durable shell midden. So a midden's a pile of old shellfish. So you know you got your oysters and your pippies and your cockles, your bones from your sea animals like your fish, etc. And then your land mammals, so your wallaby and your goanna and your possum and things like that. And so it gives a really good insight into how Aboriginal people actually live, because middens are preserved. I think the calcium carbonate preserves the actual midden, and so you can date it. You can date it quite accurately. So they've done core samples in middens along Royal National Park, including this one, and they date it to about 7,000 years. So there's at least 7,000 years of durable Aboriginal occupation on this very spot. They found human remains in this midden. Not all middens were burial sites. In fact, middens weren't really burial sites. But this one and the other one up at Garie at Middle Reel, they've found Aboriginal remains in. So now it's a protected area. And it's also protected because it's 7,000 years of heritage. They actually found a stone tool at the back of this one that comes down from the New South Wales Victorian border. So that stone tool was traded over all those different mobs and nations from about 1,000 kilometres away to reach this spot where they used it as a stone tool.
Aboriginal people believe that the earth is our mother. We always greet each other before we speak with respect for the mother. And this isn't just a quaintness and a truism. It's about reminding ourselves that we come out of the earth and we're going to return to the earth. And everything that we have comes from the earth. And we have to respect that and look after it. And in a deteriorating environment, that knowledge and that attitude is going to be very important. We can share that. We must share it for the sake of the earth. You can get a feeling for the land, and you can turn your attention to the land's care. That's what we need to do now. We need to look at our rivers and our soils and say it's not good enough to take 95% of the water out of a river and expect that river to be healthy and expect all the animals to be healthy. We have to care for the earth.
And a bit of a cheer, come on.
I'll give you a taste of friendship, because that's what it's been.
Friendship.
Oh, hello, Chaz. Careful there, boy.
But then we're in the mountains, maybe it's altitude or...
Well, it depends what's
such a nice...
You're right, Jeremy.
You know, a warm spell. It's amazing how things just all of a sudden just open up.
The water, I suppose.
Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do before I put any food or anything into my body, any water or anything, is I greet Grandfather Son. And so I'll look at Grandfather and I'll say, "Morning, Grandfather, and welcome. Thank you for the first day of my life, for the rest of my life. Thank you for my eyes that I can see this day. Thank you for my ears that I can hear this day, and I can hear the budjans, the birds, calling me and waking me up. Thank you for your light, thank you for your warmth. And thank you again for the first day of my life, for the rest of my life. Natchatong Nunga, for the mother."